Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. This is Dean Jones, the Well Seasoned Librarian. Today is Season 4, Episode 15 of the program, and we're having our guest on here today, Halina Hadas, who has written the books WitchCraft Coctails and formerly Moon Magic Mixology, two great books on how to create potions and great drinks in the home and have some fun and some insight into mythology and magic as well. She's a great guest. I really enjoy getting a chance to talk to her. She is a former bartender and a certified crystal healer, shaman, Reiki practitioner. I had a great time talking to Julia, wonderful guest. I look forward to having her back on the program, and I will be having her back in the coming week for our winter solstice panel with other authors as well, which we'll be mentioning at the end of the program. So without further ado, we're going to go right to our conversation with Halina Hadas, author of WitchCraft Coctails and Moon Magic Mixology. And onward we go. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. This is Dean Jones, and today I'm very honored to have on our program a special guest, Julia Hadas, who has written the book WitchCraft Coctails, among others. Julia, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how does it feel to have the new book out, and what kind of feedback have you gotten so far from it?
Yeah, it's been really exciting. So my first book, obviously, WitchCraft Coctails. My second book is Moon Magic Mixology, and
Yes.
It was definitely, this was in the middle of the first book came out during the pandemic, but I was able to work on it before the pandemic happened, and the second one was working on it during the pandemic. And so it was a really tough, because you don't have people to taste test, and being in California, going out and getting supplies and being safe and all of that. But so it feels good that it's finally out there. And I loved, focusing on libations and recipes that are associated with the moon. And so it's a lot of fun to imbue, the lunar cycles with cocktails. So it's been great.
I've talked to a lot of people who've written books on cookbooks on making cocktails, and not everybody who works with writing books like that has a background in it. You, however, are the real deal. You worked as a craft cocktail bartender, a manager, and worked at a distillery. Tell me about your bartending training and experience.
Yeah, I have the full load. One thing I have to say is a lot of times people struggle with trying to figure out their path in life, and then you finally arrive there and everything combines in this really weird way that you never expected. So when I was younger, I wanted to be an author, but I wanted to be a fantasy author. And then I got into witchcraft and worked at a metaphysical store and, got energy healing certified and all that stuff. And then I started, on a whim, went to a little bartending school, very informal, more of like dive bar, bartending, colored water, but instantly fell in love. It was like a little Groupon offering thing, and jumped into the craft cocktail industry in the Bay Area because we have so many, luscious ingredients, fresh ingredients, all these different herbs and fruits and farmers markets. And so, instantly joining in that scene in San Francisco, wanting to combine the witchcraft with the craft cocktail. And so I was really motivated to move up in that industry. And I think those of us who work in, cities like the Bay Area know that you have to work multiple jobs at once to make rent. So I learned working
absolutely.
as a bartender, working at a witchcraft shop, and then also working at a distillery, all at once. I actually worked for Heroin Vodka for about a year and a half. And it was a lot of fun getting that really intimate experience that a lot of people don't, even as a bartender, you don't get that experience working at a distillery. So it was a lot of fun to do that and get that intimate knowledge of the spirits industry and how everything was made, being part of the Bartenders Guild. And, I worked my way up to being a manager and quickly learned that management in a restaurant industry is very different than bartending.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Quickly went back to the bartending part of it. So yeah, I feel like I have a really intimate knowledge of the spirits industry, and I'm always trying to elevate knowledge too, because it's really in the roots of the spirits industry back to, ancient times, the roots of alcohol, that witchcraft and alcohol intermingle in a lot of ways. So I love having that background knowledge.
So I've been by the Hangar One facility in Alameda. That's a pretty nifty facility. What was that like working there?
Oh, so one thing is the view is gorgeous because you're right, in Alameda, by the water. And so you look over and see San Francisco and that giant Salesforce tower.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But lots of beautiful sunsets, with the bridges in the background. And it's definitely, because those were, hangars from, World War II and stuff like that. And so there's so much like history and the ancient feeling, with the military bases out there. So it's magical in that way. It's also nice because I worked for one of the few female distilleries in the industry, Kaylee Shoemaker, who's recently opened her own distillery in New Mexico called Alter Spirits. So
Oh,
it was
nice.
I loved the, atmosphere being, working in something that's a little different, in that kind of whole spooky vibe of the hangar and everything. So it was pretty great.
Yeah, for those who are not in the Bay Area, the Alameda location is right near like an estuary and looking over the ocean across the San Francisco city skyline. So it's a really beautiful place to kind of look at the city.
Yeah,
Um,
it's gorgeous.
Now, what did you like about being a bartender? What kind of engaged you and it made you enjoy it?
I'm someone who cannot focus on one thing at a time.
Me either. Me either.
So that's what I love about bartending is it just pleased my mind so much because it's quick thinking your feet and you're doing multiple things at once. So it was so pleasing to my brain to just keep moving. I things that I'm only doing one thing at a time, I get really tired. So it was great for my brain. I loved the story behind bartending because obviously now with the witchcraft background, I can get even deeper in the story of cocktails, but even more recent stories as far as like the history of San Francisco with all of its bars there, when was the first cocktail made, the stories of each cocktail was put together and got to be the place where it's at. It's just an ever evolving story. And so that's one thing that I really liked with bartending immediately beyond the multitasking, how quickly it was paced. The money is great too. But also the stories of each drink. And when you go to the witchcraft side of it, even further back than just the last few hundred years, but even things like shrubs, bitters, infusions, alcohol spirits themselves and how they're made, beer, wine, distillation, all of that stuff comes from ancient spiritual practices. That's alcohol was in its own name spiritual to a lot of ancient traditions and groups of people. So it's just the story of how the modern day cocktail comes to be. And then you combine a drink with the flavor and the different meanings of each ingredient. And it's magical all over. You really get a unique expression when you're making your own cocktail or a witchy craft cocktail. And then you've got so many layers of meaning and energy behind it.
I'm always really grateful for bartenders who can make really great drinks. And I love it when I go to a bar and a bartender can say, hey, do you want to try this or that? And it's always so fun. Now, on the flip side of that, I've been to a lot of conventions where people who mean well make stuff out of different substances, usually 80% blue curacao, and make these drinks like a Klingon ale or something like that at a Star Trek convention. And usually they're pretty nasty. They taste like NyQuil or something like that. How did you have fun exploring the different types of liqueurs and tinctures and things like that used in like bitters and things like that used in bartending?
Yeah. So first I have to say the guests that will let me custom make something are my favorite. So I'll have to bartend for you one day. Because it's just,
Absolutely.
someone can tell me what kind of drinks they like, what kind of flavors or what energy they're looking for, and I can put something together that's just totally unique for that moment. But as far as I think one thing is, I will say I am a little bit of like, an alcohol snob in the sense of, being in the Bay Area, the craft cocktail
Oh yeah.
industry there, and also working for Hangar One, everything, super fresh, organic,
Yeah.
and so, blue curacao does have its place, but when it's super heavy,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
really about the organic, fresh, ingredients as I can. And people are going to do what they can afford. Everything's magical in its own way. But being from the Bay Area, not industry, I totally get what you're saying.
Certified crystal healer, Blue Lotus and Blue Fire Reiki practitioner. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's actually from the Bay Area as well, from Storm Fairy Wolf's line, who's also an author. So yeah.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Crystal Realm. Is that what it's called? At the store, his store?
It was called, it's had so many evolutions over the years. Once was called Dolphin Dream, was called, then, Storm, Chaz, and Devin took it over, and it was called Mystic Dream.
Right.
And now they've called it Datura Trading Co. I apologize for mispronouncing.
Nice.
So, yeah, they evolved their shop, with the pandemic and everything being online, and they're all wonderful published authors, and they added these cool mystical plants to their shop too now. So that's why they
nice.
Just going, trading and changing the name and everything. So yeah.
I'm gonna have to check that out. So anybody, we'll put a link in the bio too, just to give them an extra shout out. But if you're in the Bay Area in Walnut Creek, really lovely town to visit, very tourist friendly. Check out the was it the Datura Trading Company?
Yeah.
Yeah. Check it out. You won't be sorry. It's really wonderful. You have a good time.
Yeah, I use all their products, all my witchy stuff, and they have lots of great services too. So
now I also like to ask people, because I know that I know when I became a pagan, it was a big turning point for me, and I started identifying myself as a witch. Although many men that have different titles they use, I have always identified as a witch. Very solidarity with the goddess worship. When did you discover you were a witch, and what was the turning point for you in your life? Or did you always feel like you were, even as a child?
I love this question. I feel like all people that would identify as witches have felt that calling since they were young, but it manifests later in life. So I was always kind of looking for witchcraft my whole life, but I was raised within an immigrant, Polish Catholic family. And so the concept that there were even people in modern times practicing witchcraft was unknown to me. I didn't even know about things like Wicca, modern paganism, or witchcraft.
Right.
And so I was always looking for these things. And, looking back, I even got to the point where, finally middle school, when we were like learning about, ancient deities, and I love cats. So the second I learned about Bast, the ancient Egyptian cat goddess, I immediately fell in love and created my own relationship with her. But it wasn't until being a freshman in high school that I learned about that Wicca was a thing. And I didn't end up being Wiccan, but I did follow that knowledge to bring me to my modern witchcraft practice. So that was about when I found it. And, it's something I felt called to my whole life. And finally you find the expression for it. And it's just all of these things open up. You feel like this thing you're waiting for your whole life is coming to reality. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think I echo a lot of the things you're saying here too.
Yeah.
Now you have an Etsy business, Fire Lotus Creations. Tell us about what you sell.
Yeah. So again, the multitasking, unable to focus on one thing at a time. So when I started working at the Mystic Dream, that was the metaphysical store that I was working at, talked about earlier. And immediately, crystals, stones, obviously I love working with herbs, especially now with the cocktail practice, but I ended up doing a lot of, stuff with energy work. And part along with that comes, working with stones and their energetic properties. And so I learned how to wire wrap very slowly over time. And so I do put together, these little it's artistic expression. So I never make the same piece twice because it's what I'm feeling in the moment. But I'll put together different pairings of stones for energetic purposes to help people, on their healing journey. It kind of helps to have, if you're actively working on something, to have some kind of piece of jewelry or something you can wear to help you consistently work on changing that vibration. So yeah.
I love that. And I'll put a link to Fire Lotus Creations as well in the bio. Just look for that if you want to look that up as well.
Tell us about your blog, WitchCraft Coctails.
Yeah, so WitchCraft Cocktails, the blog, was something that I started kind of, on a whim. When I first went into the bar industry, I immediately thought of it, but you never really entertain a lot of ideas as being realistic or possible until you start to see it. So it wasn't until I ended up landing at a bar at the time called Bar 41 in Oakland that would let me do weekend specials. And so I would do weekend specials with different astrological themes, and we'd have a row reader and whatnot. And the manager there kind of pushed me to start a blog. And I thought a blog was supposed to be super complicated, but she's like, no, you can just keep it super simple. And so I started that blog when I was working there with some different recipes I was doing, weekend. And it was through that blog that I ended up doing a little workshop that my publisher eventually found me about a year later. So it's kind of cool how that happens. You just put yourself out there and things together at some time. So yeah, I've had it since, I can't remember quite accurately, but I want to say 2017 was the blog, or 2018. And then I had saved, the domain names and the accounts a bit before then. So I think it was either 2017 or 2018.
Tell us how you began writing and what inspired you to become a writer.
It's funny because I mentioned earlier, back in high school, because I was someone that struggled with, reading and writing when I was younger until I found a genre that I liked, which was fantasy. Then I couldn't put books down. So I wanted to be a fantasy author for a while, and did a special project in high school, to look into creative writing and all those things as a serious way. But, I always had the goal of being an author, but it was just in a totally different direction. And then, college and life happens and you stop pursuing it for, a while. So I'd always hoped, but, never quite in the way that it came together. So yeah, I didn't necessarily think I would have a book published, but I had always kind of hoped in some genre. So yeah.
Tell us about your 2 books.
Yeah, so my first book, WitchCraft Coctails. So that was a really fun one because I had all this stuff saved up from when I was, bartending, from different special recipes I would do on the weekend specials. And so I kind of already had in my head planned what WitchCraft Cocktails as a book would look like. And part of that also comes from the fact that I am a professional craft cocktail bartender, so I know what a good craft cocktail book looks like, right? A lot of these, magical books, at least at the time, wouldn't have like a lot of photos, would just be lists, ongoing lists and all that. And so I have the knowledge of the craft cocktail books where they have wonderful photos on one side and a recipe on the other, and how it's organized and all that. So with WitchCraft Cocktails, the first one, taking the ideas from the weekend specials I served. I did have some taste testers then, thankfully, for that book, and putting it together in a way that a good craft cocktail book, magical or not, would be put together. And they ended up getting a photographer, through my publisher, which is Adams Media. They got a great photographer to take these witchy looking photos and all of that. And I really wanted to show people with the first book, to kind of lay the foundation of how you can make your own magical craft cocktails. And so you don't know if someone picking up this book is going to be a beginner in magic or advanced witchcraft practitioner, or if they're going to be a beginner craft cocktail person, or if they're going to be more advanced. And so I wanted to include kind of a wide spectrum, that there's some more complicated recipes, some simpler ones, but also kind of set up the notion of, hey, you can change up any recipe in a way that works better for your flavor preference, because everyone has a taste palette as unique as their magical practice, right? But also, to make things work for your flavor, for your magic. If you're like, oh, recipe sounds good, but I want to make it a little more purification based, you could switch out, the bourbon for gin, possibly. I can't guarantee that would taste good all the time, but it can. So I really wanted to set up the first in a way that was approachable for all levels of craft cocktail and witchcraft practices, but also inspire people to do their own recipes. And then the second book, after I got the book deal and everything, I was like, oh, people are actually interested in this concept. So I got active again on my blog and started focusing on recipes for each moon. And that eventually evolved into the second book, Moon Magic Mixology, where there's recipes for the variety of moons. I like to work with the moon for a point of personal growth and transformation based off of what astrological sign the moon is in. So I tried to pack in a lot of information in one place, what ingredients are associated with each moon and sign, the meanings of the various moons, the meanings of the moon in various signs and all of that. And then recipes too. People can always change for themselves as well, but to show people the way, the moon, right, has a pull on the tides. It affects liquid. So, and there's actually on that point that the moon is somewhat responsible for evolution because it pulled the tides that created evolution to start. So, having these liquid libations is like the perfect way to celebrate the moon. And then there's corresponding rituals, as there was with the first book, and crystals with whatnot with each drink to help bring it, the magical practice and the liquid libation offering together into a wholesome ritual, if you like.
Tell us about some of your favorite drinks from the 2 books that you wrote.
Favorite drinks from the first 2 books. It's going to be hard because there's a lot of drinks and they serve different purposes. But you know what? We are at the time of Yule. So I'm very Yule and winter solstice focused right now. And I have to say, the Awakening Yule Mule is freaking delicious. It's got this nice bergamot rosemary syrup, fresh pomegranate rosemary, other things in there. So that would be one that I would definitely go to this time of year. Absolutely delicious. And there's a lot of other ones in there. Let me think for a moment. I don't have my book in front of me, but that's one that I've really been focused on this time of year. There's a nice dark and stormy recipe in there, money making dark and stormy with the Capricorn moon coming up. So that's a good time to use that one. Has a nice ginger liqueur. And then from the second book, Persephone's Descent from the first book too. That's a really popular one. Pomegranate based too, great for this time of year. Even has the Reaper, which is a mulled wine recipe, and mulled wine dates back to ancient Rome. So that was one that I did for the Samhain and things like that. And there's also like the Witch's Cauldron, which is themed off of a scorpion bowl, but a little different, obviously different ingredients. And so, if you want to try and put 151 rum in there and set it on fire, do that with your own safety. But the idea was, you put that in like a little cauldron bowl. It's got ingredients for blessings and things like that. And you can put some dry ice and have it like a bubbling cauldron. So those are some of the more delicious ones or the favorite ones that I think, you can use, especially the Persephone's Descent. I love working with that energy, going into the dark side, especially with winter, and investigating the shadow self. And it's just such a luscious, delicious drink. For the second book, some of my more favorite ones, I have another mulled wine recipe, but it's actually a white mulled wine. So it's using white wine instead of red wine. And I love that one because it's associated with the waning moon. And so it has all of these different ingredients involved. It actually has to do with the gibbous waning moon. And so there's ingredients for celebrating gratitude and abundance to help bring in, but also be in this place of thankfulness to receive, as well as, what was the other one that was just on my mind? Oh, it's always hard to think of things on the spot. There's 70 recipes in each book. Oh, there's a great my favorite recipe from the second book is a violet liqueur. I love violet liqueurs, and it's great for, working with that more peaceful, calming, hopeful energy, and also for transformation. And so there is a violet liqueur recipe in there that I think surpasses most of the violet liqueurs I would buy at the shop. So that is my favorite recipe. And then there's like fun stuff in there, like the butterfly pea flower, which changes color upon contact with acid. And so it's great for more of the feminine energy of the moon and also transformation. So there's some color changing concoctions. I tried to put some of my Polish roots in there, poppy seed milk recipe, but of course I'm witchy and added, herbs, lavender and things. And and all of that. So those would probably be my top go-tos.
Now, in addition to being a bartender and an author, you're also a vocalist for bands and perform as a singer. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yes. Being a vocalist. So, I grew up with my mother. She actually pursued music in college, but like most people, at the time where the internet wasn't so abundant, didn't end up pursuing a career in music because it was really hard she loved opera and it was hard to get her name out there. And so I grew up listening to my mom, in church with her beautiful voice, and it really inspired me to want to do singing. And so, later on in life, I joined a little band where we would cover, rock music. So things like AC/DC, Heartbreaker by Pat Benatar. We do some Led Zeppelin, like Immigrant Song, What Is and What Should Never Be, things like that. So a lot of those, and Blondie, of course, One Way or Another, Black Sabbath. I could go on. Anyway, my favorite type of music is, rock and metal music. So, I joined a little dad band, as it's called, because essentially everyone in there is dad. I think that goes with the Bay Area a bit too. But anyway, and so we were just a smaller, like we did a few, different events. We didn't really do a lot, because the pandemic had happened. And I ended up moving to Arizona. So went a little bit of a different direction, and I'll get back into singing, but it was definitely a lot of fun to do that. And those classics are just great. So yeah.
Now, in addition to your writing and your work, you also have a degree in anthropology. Why did you decide to go into that field of study?
Yes. So originally in college, I pursued creative writing, English as a degree, because I wanted to be an author. And I had mentored with, some story editors and, some professional writers and whatnot. But I ended up deciding that I don't need an English degree to become an author. And beyond that, if I got an English degree, I'd be pushed into the side of being a teacher, which I didn't really want to be at the time. So at least in English. So I decided to, there was a class at DVC at the community college called Magic, Witchcraft, and Religion. And of course, being interested in witchcraft, I took that class and discovered a love for anthropology. I love anthropology, especially being a witch, because on one hand, it helps modern anthropology, should clarify, helps us to understand where different practices come from and how to respect different practices. But also anthropology kind of, to me, teaches us how limitless we are humans, because through cultural anthropology, physical anthropology, all those things, you actually learn the deep ways that humans have evolved and how their different ideas about social norms have evolved, and how those things are really cultural creations and not actual facts. And so I found anthropology to be really liberating as to who I could and couldn't be on a person based off of how it was perceived. And so I just loved it. And, respect for different beliefs from around the world and understanding that. And so I changed to a BA in anthropology and a double minor in English literature and public policy. And of course, I have so far done nothing with those degrees.
What authors inspired you as a witch? Who was your big inspirations, and who did you read in your studies, developing your craft?
Oh, yes. Well, so paganism and magic, of course. The people who basically, raised me in the magical world would be, Storm, Chaz, and Devin. So I learned a lot from working from them and then their books. But also Sandra Kynes is a big person whose work I read. She does a lot of work on magical herbalism. And so I've read a lot of her stuff. Dorothy Morrison is a big one. Dorothy Morrison was one of the first people that I picked up a book from, back when I was in high school, early high school. She was, the predominant author at the time. And so I picked up some of her books. She has great, she has great moon magic books, everyday magic, sun magic. And I think what I really liked about her was her magic was so approachable, everyday things you have around you, and taking things like the different phases and the signs of the moon are, and how can you incorporate that into ritual. So she's a big influence and inspiration as well with my stuff. And then, oh yes, a more modern one. Oh, I'm trying to remember her name. I might have to look her up. She wrote Moonology. Yasmin Boland. So she focuses more on astrology, and I don't follow her stuff to a T, but I also like the different rituals she does for working with the moons, and whether or not you use them to work with the moons. It just kind of helps you tune into how to align, your rituals in a way of releasing and intention setting. And also, of course, a big one that I got crystal healing certified in would be Hibiscus Moon. She has a background in science, and so I love, working with her stuff and her teachings. So she's another, a big one that I connect with as far as working with crystals and understanding the science of vibration and all that.
Now, you said that if somebody came to you, you like to make drinks for people based on what they like. So I really like a good vodka martini or gin and tonic. I also like scotch and bitters and things with cassis in them, anything with blackcurrant. What would you make for me?
Okay. Let's see. Vodka, martinis, and a gin and tonic and bitters. Well, you have to tell me. So the first thing I'd ask is, what kind of flavors do you like, right? So that's a big part of it. Orange. Okay, that's great. Wonderful. Do you mean creme de cassis? Do you like red currant? Oh my God. I have to tell you, red currant liqueur is one of my favorite things to work with, especially because my family's from Poland. And so you can go to the store in Poland and just buy red currant juice. And not a lot of people know what I work with that. So red currant is one of my favorite liqueurs to work with. And you mentioned gin. So easily right away, we're going to use triple sec. We're going to use gin. We're going to probably choose some kind of syrup, maybe a honey syrup. Muddle rosemary. We can choose some bitters, depending on how the cocktail turns out. I might want to add Ango or Angostura because it has a lot of flavors that can help balance. But we can also change it up. And so I'd muddle the bitters with rosemary and the syrup. Then I'm adding gin. I'm probably feeling lemon in this case, a little bit of triple sec or orange liqueur, and then creme de cassis. That would just be a phenomenal drink. I know, I am already tasting it. I have all the ingredients right now, so I'm probably going to make it after we get off.
I want to thank Halina Hadas for being on the show to talk about her books, Moon Magic Mixology and WitchCraft Coctails, and also for her continual patience on recording this episode. We had to record it several times because of technical difficulties. So Julia, thank you very much for your patience. Please tune in next week. Julia actually will be back with us next week. We're going to have a couple of events coming up next week that are kind of special to me. The first one is going to be our Winter Solstice author panel. We're going to have Julia is going to come back with also Laurel Woodward, who we've had on the show previously, J.D. Walker, who's also been on the show, and additionally Lysana Wallens, who's been on the show as well. So all four of those authors are going to come back and talk with us about the winter solstice. It's a wonderful episode. I think you're going to really love it. I really enjoyed it, and so much so that we talked about doing another one for summer solstice as well. So please be here next week on Tuesday, the solstice, for our summer solstice episode. And then coming up after that, we're going to have a Christmas episode for the members, my fellow alumni with One Table, One World. We're going to have some authors who've been on here before, who are my fellow compatriots for One Table, One World. We're going to have writer Terry Barr, who is my first guest, going to be on here. And he's going to talk about his work and what he's been doing in the past year. Also, previous guest Melissa Matthews, she's going to be on here as well. And Catherine Dillon, who's going to be on the show. That's going to be really wonderful. Really enjoyed recording that with them, and I can't wait to have you hear that one as well. So hope you all have happy holidays, and I hope that you can come back and listen to our group panels next week. Then we're going to take a little bit of a break, and we're going to come back in January, and we're going to have a wonderful season of episodes I've already recorded. We have many guests, so many that I have basically January full already, and I can't wait to have you come back and listen to that as well. It's going to be a great start to what will be season 5. I'm very happy to say, so I can't wait to begin that with you as well. Again, great guests. So until then, come back next week and listen to our group podcasts, and until then, have happy holidays to you. And again, as always, happy cooking.